Welcome, traveler. We're glad you're here. Every story you hear is made with care and passion. If you enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and check out the other adventures waiting for you on our channel. Your support means the world. Thank you. General Varlan Creed stood rigid on the command deck of the Temporal Vanguard, hands clasped behind his back as he watched the stars blur past. The massive battle cruiser cut through the fabric of spacetime, leading the 9th Retaliation Fleet toward Bastion Zeta. Intelligence had reported Skarn activity in the system 3 days ago, and Creed's orders were simple: eliminate the threat with extreme prejudice. "Sir, we're approaching the Vega sector," Lieutenant Commander Myra Kess announced from her tactical station. "Temporal coordinates locked. We'll emerge precisely 48 hours after the distress signal." Creed nodded, his weathered face a mask of calm despite the anxiety gnawing at his gut. 52 years old, lean and scarred from countless battles, he had spent more than 3 decades defending the Terran Ascendancy. The aging commander had survived the brutal expansion wars, clawed his way up from nothing on the fortress world of Darien IV, and earned both the loyalty of his soldiers and the fear of politicians, but the Skarn were different from any enemy he had faced before. "Prepare for temporal jump," he ordered, voice low and steady. "All hands to battle stations." The bridge hummed with activity as officers rushed to their positions. Tactical displays flickered with data streams, quantum calculations unfolding across holographic interfaces. Creed felt the familiar pre-battle tension settle in his chest, a cold weight he had carried into combat more times than he could remember. "Temporal jump in 5, 4, 3. The navigator's voice echoed across the command deck. 2, 1. Mark. Reality shifted. The stars outside the viewport stretched into brilliant streaks of light, then snapped back into position as the fleet emerged from the jump. Creed's eyes narrowed, scanning the tactical display for signs of the enemy. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Status report," he barked, already knowing the answer. "Sir," Kess replied, voice tight with disbelief, "Bastion Zeta is gone. The defense platforms, orbital stations, everything. The planet shows signs of bombardment consistent with Skarn temporal weaponry." Creed stared at the display. Bastion Zeta had been one of the Ascendancy's most heavily fortified worlds, home to the 5th Defense Array and over 8 billion citizens. It should have been able to hold out for weeks against any conventional attack. "That's impossible," Vice Admiral Thorne said, stepping up beside Creed. "Our intelligence indicated the Skarn only began their assault 3 days ago. This level of destruction would take." "They're here," Creed cut him off, pointing to the flashing alert on the tactical display. "Multiple temporal signatures. They knew we were coming." The alert klaxons blared as dozens of Skarn vessels materialized around the fleet, appearing from nowhere like ghosts stepping out of the void. Their ships were organic-looking monstrosities, all jagged angles and pulsing blue energy veins, warping the very fabric of spacetime around them. "Evasive maneuvers!" Creed shouted. "Fire pattern Delta 9. Focus on their temporal anchors." The Ascendancy fleet responded instantly, battle cruisers and destroyers breaking formation to engage the enemy. The void erupted in dazzling light as energy weapons tore through the darkness. The Temporal Vanguard shuddered under Creed's feet as it unleashed its forward batteries, but the Skarn were ready for them. Retrocausal missiles, weapons that struck before they were fired, phased through the fleet's defenses, exploding within the hulls of 3 destroyers simultaneously. Gravity anchors locked several cruisers in place across multiple timelines, making them easy targets for the Skarn's reality-warping cannons. "We're being torn apart," Thorne growled, gripping the command rail as the ship rocked from a nearby explosion. Creed watched in horror as one of his frigates exploded 5 times in succession, caught in a temporal loop that played out its destruction in overlapping realities. The fleet was losing, and losing badly. "Sir," Kess called out, her voice steady despite the chaos, "sensors are detecting a massive temporal distortion forming at the edge of the system. Readings suggest it's a chrono rift. They're trying to collapse our timeline's anchor point." Creed made his decision in an instant. "All vessels, prepare for emergency temporal retreat. Coordinates Beta 7 Alpha. We can't hold this position." As the fleet prepared to jump, Creed noticed something strange on the main view screen, a message burning itself into the fabric of local spacetime, visible for just a moment before it faded. "You started this." The words chilled him more than the defeat. Because deep down, Creed was beginning to suspect they might be true. The journey back to Chronopolis Prime was tense and silent. The 9th Retaliation Fleet limped through temporal space, having lost nearly 40% of its strength at Bastion Zeta. Creed spent most of the trip in his quarters, reviewing battle footage and searching for any weakness in the Skarn attack pattern. He found none when they finally arrived at the heart of the Terran Ascendancy, the gleaming city world suspended in its sealed time vault. Creed was immediately summoned to the Echelon Council. The Clockheart Chamber was a massive structure at the center of Chronopolis Prime, its walls lined with time-lock displays showing every major world in the Ascendancy. The 7 counselors sat at a circular table of polished chromium, surrounded by the elite Chrono Guard in their paradox armor. Counselor Ilara Vex, the eldest and most influential member of the council, gestured for Creed to approach. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, face aristocratic and cold. "General Creed," she began, "your failure at Bastion Zeta is concerning." Creed stood at attention, refusing to be intimidated. "With respect, Counselor, we were ambushed. The Skarn were there 3 days before our scheduled arrival. They knew we were coming. Are you suggesting a security breach within the Ascendancy?" Counselor Marlin asked, his thin lips curled in distaste. "I'm suggesting," Creed replied carefully, "that the Skarn have capabilities we don't fully understand. They're manipulating time with precision we've never seen before." "What we've never seen before," Vex said coldly, "is the fall of a fortress world in less than 72 hours. The public is panicking. Riots have broken out on 3 rim worlds. The Chrono Mandate is being questioned for the first time in centuries." Another counselor, a thin man named Rexon, leaned forward. "The Skarn attacks are following a pattern. This isn't random aggression, it's a calculated campaign." Vex nodded grimly. "Our analysts have discovered something disturbing. The pattern of strategic defeats and assassinations is forming what appears to be a causal net, designed to collapse humanity's origin point." Creed felt his blood run cold. "They're trying to erase us from history." "Precisely," Vex confirmed. "And we need you to prevent it." A holographic display appeared above the table, showing a man Creed recognized immediately, Counselor Urek Marlin, the same man sitting across from him now. Except the hologram showed him boarding a shuttle 3 days in the future. "Tomorrow," Vex explained, "Counselor Marlin will be traveling to Antares Gate for a security summit. Intelligence suggests the Skarn will attempt to assassinate him en route. Your mission is to ensure his safe arrival." Marlin looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "Antares Gate," Creed repeated, understanding immediately why this mission was critical. Antares Gate was one of the Ascendancy's most important temporal nexus points, a world critical to humanity's development. If it fell, the damage to their timeline would be catastrophic. "You'll be provided with a new intelligence officer," Vex continued. "Lieutenant Dana Vose. She's young but brilliant, specializing in Skarn tactical analysis." Creed nodded, though he disliked the idea of having a council spy aboard his ship. "When do we depart?" "Immediately," Vex replied. "The shuttle is being prepared as we speak." As Creed turned to leave, Counselor Marlin spoke up. "General," he said, his voice oddly strained, "remember your oath to the Chrono Mandate. Some knowledge is forbidden for a reason." The warning stuck with Creed as he left the chamber. Something wasn't right about this mission. The Council was hiding something, he could feel it in his bones. Lieutenant Dana Vose was waiting for him outside the Clockheart chamber. She stood at attention, her uniform pristine, dark hair pulled back in a regulation knot. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, assessed Creed as he approached. "General Creed," she said, saluting crisply. "Lieutenant Dana Vose, Temporal Intelligence, reporting for duty." Creed returned the salute. "At ease, Lieutenant. I understand you're an expert on our enemy." "I've specialized in Skarn behavioral patterns and temporal tactics, yes, sir." Her voice was confident, betraying none of the nervousness most officers displayed when meeting him for the first time. I've studied every encounter we've had with them since they first appeared 18 months ago. And what have you learned? Creed asked as they walked toward the shuttle bay. That they're not what we think they are, sir. She matched his stride easily. The Council believes they're extra-dimensional invaders, but my analysis suggests otherwise. Their tactics are too human. Creed glanced at her sharply. Explain. They target specific temporal nexus points with cultural or historical significance to humanity. They use psychological warfare techniques designed to demoralize us specifically. Vos lowered her voice. And there's something else. In every major engagement, they've left messages burned into temporal fabric. Messages in human languages. Like you started this. Creed asked, remembering the burning words he'd seen at Bastion Zeta. Vos looked surprised. You saw that? It wasn't in your official report. No, Creed admitted. It wasn't. He didn't explain why, that he'd been uncertain what the message meant or what reaction it might provoke from the Council. What does it mean, Lieutenant? I don't know, sir, she replied honestly. But I intend to find out. They reached the shuttle bay where Councillor Marlin was already boarding the sleek diplomatic vessel that would take them to Antares Gate. A squad of chrono guards stood at attention nearby, their paradox armor gleaming under the bay lights. As they approached the shuttle, Creed felt a strange sensation, a temporal echo, like déjà vu but stronger. He'd experienced it before in areas of heavy time manipulation. Something was wrong. Lieutenant, he said quietly, how well do you trust the Council? Vos blinked, clearly surprised by the question. So? Answer the question, Lieutenant. She hesitated, then answered carefully. I believe in the Ascendancy and its mission, sir. The Council has guided humanity through a millennium of peace and prosperity. A diplomatic answer from a true believer. Creed nodded, unsurprised but somewhat disappointed. Stay alert, he murmured as they boarded the shuttle. I have a feeling this mission isn't what it seems. The diplomatic shuttle launched without incident, breaking free of Chronopolis Prime's gravity well before engaging its temporal drives. Councillor Marlin retreated to his private quarters immediately, leaving Creed and Vos alone in the main cabin with the chrono guards. How long until we reach Antares Gate? Creed asked, studying the navigation display. Approximately 6 hours, sir, Vos replied. We're taking an indirect route to avoid potential Skarn ambush points. Creed nodded, still unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had served the Ascendancy faithfully for decades, followed orders without question, fought and bled for the peace that time mastery had brought humanity. But lately, doubt had begun to creep in. Lieutenant, he said quietly, ensuring the chrono guards couldn't overhear, what do you know about the origin of the Skarn? Vos frowned. Only what's in the official records, sir. They appeared 18 months ago, attacking Outer Rim colonies without warning or apparent motive. And before that? Nothing? No records of any similar species or technology, she confirmed. They seemed to come from nowhere. Or now hen, Creed mused. Have you ever wondered why the Council forbids research into alternative timelines? Vos's expression grew guarded. The chrono mandate is clear, sir. Unrestricted temporal manipulation threatens the stability of our reality. So we're told, Creed agreed. But what if a sudden alarm cut him off? Red lights flashed throughout the cabin as the shuttle systems went into emergency mode. Temporal distortion detected, the pilot's voice came over the comp, multiple signatures approaching fast. Creed was on his feet instantly, moving toward the cockpit with Vos close behind. Status report. 3 Skarn vessels, the pilot reported, fingers flying over the controls. They've emerged directly in our path, impossible to avoid. Through the viewport, Creed could see them, 3 nightmarish ships, their hulls rippling with blue temporal energy. They moved with unnatural precision, surrounding the shuttle in a perfect triangle formation. Evasive maneuvers. Creed ordered. Send a distress signal to Chronopolis. Communications are being jammed, the pilot replied, panic edging into his voice. They're charging weapons. The first blast hit the shuttle's port side, sending it spinning through space. Emergency systems whined as artificial gravity fluctuated. Creed grabbed a handhold to steady himself, watching as the chrono guards moved to protect Counselor Marlin's quarters. "Sir," Vose called out, pointing to a display showing the engine status, that hit was too precise. "They're not trying to destroy us, they're targeting specific systems." She was right. The Skarn were disabling the shuttle piece by piece, with surgical precision that spoke of intimate knowledge of its design. How could they know exactly where to hit us? Creed wondered aloud. The answer came in the most unexpected way. The door to Marlin's quarters slid open, and one of the chrono guards stepped out, except something was wrong with him. His movements were jerky, mechanical, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural blue light. "Temporal infection," Vose gasped. "He's been compromised." The corrupted guard raised his weapon, a time-splitting blade that could cut through both matter and time, and lunged toward the cockpit. Creed reacted instinctively, drawing his sidearm and firing in one fluid motion. The energy pulse hit the guard in the chest, but instead of falling, he seemed to flicker, his image splitting into multiple overlapping versions of himself. "Damn," Creed growled. "Paradox armor." The remaining guards moved to intercept their corrupted comrade, time blades humming with energy as they engaged in combat. The shuttle rocked again as another blast from the Skarn vessels hit them. Creed fought his way to the cockpit, where the pilot was desperately trying to maintain control of the damaged vessel. "Can we still jump?" he demanded. "Temporal drives are offline," the pilot replied grimly. "We're trapped." Behind them, the battle between the guards had escalated. Two were already down, their bodies phasing in and out of reality as the paradox armor failed. The corrupted guard moved with impossible speed, as if he existed slightly ahead of normal time. "We need to reach Counselor Marlin," Creed told Vose. "If the Skarn want him dead, our priority is keeping him alive." They fought their way back through the cabin, Creed providing covering fire while Vose programmed her memory anchor, a device that allowed her to maintain temporal coherence even when reality was being manipulated. As they approached Marlin's quarters, the door slid open again. Counselor Marlin stepped out, but like the guard, something was wrong with him. His face was calm, unnaturally so, and his eyes held a knowing look that sent a chill down Creed's spine. "General Creed," he said, his voice echoing strangely as if coming from multiple points in time simultaneously. "Right on schedule." "Counselor." Creed aimed his weapon at Marlin, uncertainty staying his trigger finger. "What's happening?" Marlin smiled thinly. "The beginning of the end, General. Or perhaps the end of the beginning. Time is so relative, wouldn't you agree?" A blinding flash of blue light erupted from Marlin's body. Creed felt himself being thrown backward, his consciousness fragmenting as reality itself seemed to tear around them. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Vose diving toward him, her memory anchor glowing as she grabbed his arm. Creed awoke to the taste of blood and the sound of emergency sirens. He lay on the floor of the shuttle, which was now dark except for the flashing red emergency lights. His head throbbed, and when he touched his temple, his fingers came away wet with blood. "General? General, can you hear me?" Vose knelt beside him, her face smudged with soot, a nasty cut across her forehead. She helped him sit up, checking his pupils for signs of concussion. "What happened?" Creed rasped, his throat dry. "Temporal explosion," Vose explained. "Counselor Marlin, he wasn't himself. He triggered some kind of device, a chronometric bomb, I think. If I hadn't activated my memory anchor and linked it to you, we'd both be temporally displaced right now." Creed looked around the damaged shuttle. The bodies of the chrono guards lay scattered throughout the cabin, some still flickering between states of existence. The corrupted guard was nowhere to be seen. "The Skarn ships." "Gone," Vose said. "They left as soon as the explosion happened." Almost as if that was their goal all along. Creed struggled to his feet, leaning on Vose for support as they made their way to the cockpit. The pilot was dead, his body partially phased into the control panel, a gruesome result of temporal disruption. "Life support is failing," Vose reported after checking the systems. And we're drifting without propulsion. Unless we're picked up soon. Creed wasn't listening. He was staring at the main view screen, which was displaying a message. Not on the screen itself, but burned into the fabric of space-time outside the shuttle, visible through the viewport. Dig deeper, Creed. Vault 7 Alpha. Learn what they hide. Do you see that? He asked Vose. She followed his gaze, eyes widening. Another message, but this one's different. It's directed at you specifically. Creed felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. This wasn't a random attack. Marlin was the target, yes, but this whole thing was orchestrated for another purpose. He turned to Vose. They wanted us to see this message. Vault 7 Alpha. Vose frowned. That's in the restricted archives on Chronopolis. Access is limited to council members only. Exactly. Creed's mind was racing. Lieutenant, I need to know where your loyalties lie. Not to the Ascendancy's ideals, but right now, in this moment. Vose hesitated, studying his face. Whatever she saw there seemed to help her decide. My loyalty is to the truth, sir. Whatever that may be. Creed nodded, satisfied. Good. Because I think we've been fighting the wrong enemy. And I intend to find out why. They were rescued 6 hours later by an Ascendancy patrol vessel that had picked up their faint distress signal. The official story was simple. Skarn forces had ambushed the diplomatic shuttle, killing Councillor Marlin and most of the escort. General Creed and Lieutenant Vose had survived by luck, and quick thinking. No one questioned it. No one except Councillor Vex, who summoned Creed to a private meeting as soon as they returned to Chronopolis Prime. You expect me to believe, she said coldly, pacing her luxurious office overlooking the time-locked city, that one of our most heavily guarded councillors was assassinated by Skarn infiltrators, and you, despite your decades of combat experience, could do nothing to prevent it. Creed stood at attention, face impassive. The attack was coordinated and precise, Councillor. They knew exactly when and where to strike. Which suggests a security breach at the highest levels, Vex concluded. A disturbing thought, wouldn't you agree, General? Very disturbing, Creed agreed carefully. Vex stopped pacing and fixed him with a penetrating stare. Marlin was a voice of caution on the council. He advocated for diplomatic solutions, for reaching out to the Skarn. I wasn't aware we had attempted diplomacy with them. We haven't, Vex said flatly. Marlin's views were problematic. But now, with his death, the Council is united. We will launch a full temporal offensive against the Skarn homeworld as soon as it's located. Creed kept his expression neutral, though inside, alarm bells were ringing. And has a replacement for Councillor Marlin been selected? That's not your concern, General. Vex smiled thinly. Your concern is preparing your fleet for war. The 9th will be reinforced and ready to deploy within 48 hours. My fleet was nearly destroyed at Bastion Zeta, Creed pointed out. My officers and crew need time to recover, and we need better intelligence on the enemy. You'll be provided with everything you need, Vex assured him. And, General? This time, failure is not an option. As he left the meeting, Creed knew he was running out of time. Whatever truth lay in Vault 7 Alpha, he needed to find it before he was sent back into battle. And for that, he would need help. Breaking into the restricted archives is treason, Vose said calmly, sitting across from Creed in his private quarters aboard the docked temporal Vanguard. Punishable by temporal erasure. I'm aware, Creed replied, pouring them both a measure of dairy and whiskey, a rare commodity from his homeworld. But consider this, why would the Skarn go to such lengths to direct us to Vault 7 Alpha if it didn't contain something crucial? Something that might explain their attacks. Vose sipped her drink thoughtfully. You believe the Council is hiding something about the Skarn? Something in those archives? I believe, Creed said carefully, that after a millennium of peace through overwhelming force, the Ascendancy has become accustomed to keeping secrets. And I believe that those secrets are now coming back to haunt us. Vose set down her glass. Even if I agreed with you, the restricted archives are impossible to access without Council authorization. The security protocols can be bypassed, Creed interrupted. With the right credentials. He activated a small holographic projector on his desk, displaying an image of Counselor Marlin. This is from 3 years ago, he explained. Before whatever changed him, before he was compromised. Vose stared at the hologram, understanding dawning on her face. You're not suggesting time-snatching, Creed confirmed grimly. We pull a version of Marlin from the past, before he was turned. Use his credentials to access the vault, then return him to his proper time with no memory of what happened. That's... Vose looked shocked. General, that's a Class 1 violation of the Chrono Mandate. It's exactly what we accuse the Skarn of doing. I know. Creed's face was grim. But I'm beginning to wonder if the difference between us and them is smaller than we've been led to believe. Vose was silent for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. If what you suspect is true, if the Council is hiding something about the origin of the Skarn, then the future of humanity might depend on us finding out what it is. She took a deep breath. I'll help you. Creed nodded, relieved but not surprised. He had judged her character correctly from the beginning, idealistic but fundamentally committed to truth. We'll need to be careful, he said. Very careful. The time snatch has to be precise, targeting a moment when Marlin was alone and wouldn't be missed for at least an hour. I can modify a portable temporal extractor from the ship's equipment, Vose offered. But we'll need an isolated location for the extraction, somewhere outside the time vault surveillance. Leave that to me, Creed said. I still have contacts in the lower levels of Chronopolis. As they planned their act of treason, Creed couldn't help but wonder if they were playing directly into the enemy's hands. But the burning message haunted him, dig deeper, Creed. If the Skarn wanted him to discover something hidden in the Ascendancy's past, perhaps it was time to find out why. The abandoned maintenance level beneath Chronopolis Prime's western quadrant was perfect for their purposes, isolated, shielded from temporal scanners by layers of chronostatic alloys, and accessible through service tunnels that weren't monitored by central security. Creed arrived first, using his military override codes to access the restricted area. He had told his executive officer that he was taking personal time to recover from the shuttle attack, buying them a 12-hour window of operation. Vose joined him an hour later, carrying a modified temporal extractor disguised as standard engineering equipment. Her face was pale but determined as she set up the device. This is calibrated to locate Counselor Marlin 3 years, 2 months, and 15 days ago, she explained, activating the extractor's targeting systems. According to his public schedule, he was alone in his private study during this period, reviewing legislation. How long can we keep him here? Creed asked, watching as the temporal field began to form in the center of the room. 30 minutes, maximum, Vose replied. Any longer and we risk creating a temporal paradox that could alert the Chrono Guard. The extractor hummed louder, energy coalescing into a swirling vortex of blue-white light. Reality seemed to bend around it, creating a tunnel through time itself. Creed felt the hairs on his arms stand on end as temporal energy washed over him. Ready? Vose asked, finger poised over the activation switch. Creed nodded. Do it. Vose pressed the switch, and the vortex pulsed once, twice, then stabilized. A figure began to form within it, hazy at first, then solidifying into the unmistakable form of Counselor Urek Marlin. He appeared younger, less careworn than the version Creed had known, his eyes clear and alert. As the extraction completed, Marlin stumbled forward, disoriented. He looked around wildly, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he recognized Creed. General? What is the meaning of this? Where am I? Counselor Marlin, Creed said calmly, I apologize for the abrupt extraction. We need your help. Marlin's eyes narrowed as he took in the temporal extractor and their location. You've conducted an unauthorized time snatch. Do you have any idea what you've done? The penalties for this are severe, Creed finished for him. Yes, we're aware. But we wouldn't have taken this risk without good reason. In approximately 3 years, Vose added, stepping forward, you'll be assassinated by what appear to be Skarn infiltrators. But before that happens, you'll leave us a message directing us to Vault 7 Alpha in the restricted archives. Marlin paled. 3 years. He seemed to age before their eyes, shoulders slumping. So they find me. Despite everything. Creed exchanged a glance with Vose. Who finds you, Counselor? Marlin laughed bitterly. Isn't it obvious? The remnants. The survivors. Those we tried to erase from history. He looked up at Creed, his eyes haunted. How much do you know about the Skarn, General? Only what the Council has told us, Creed replied. That they're extratemporal invaders attacking from outside known time. Invaders? Marlin shook his head. No, not invaders. Survivors. And they're more human than you know. Creed felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. Explain. Marlin looked at the temporal extractor, noting the timer counting down. We don't have much time, so listen carefully. 3 centuries ago, the Ascendancy discovered something unprecedented, a parallel human timeline, a branch of reality where humanity had evolved differently. The Divergence timeline, Vose breathed, recognition dawning on her face. It's real? I thought it was just a theory. More than real, Marlin confirmed grimly. It was a thriving civilization, advanced in ways different from our own. They focused on biological enhancement rather than temporal manipulation. They called themselves the Continuum. What happened to them? Creed asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. The Echelon Council of that era saw them as a threat, Marlin explained, his voice heavy with regret. A competing version of humanity that might one day discover temporal technology and challenge our supremacy. So they made a decision, one that I've spent years trying to undo. They erased the Continuum from history, Creed said, the pieces falling into place. A preemptive chrono strike. Marlin nodded. Operation TIMEBURN. They targeted key points in the Continuum's development, collapsing their timeline into ours, rewriting history to eliminate any trace of their existence. His face twisted with disgust. It was temporal genocide. But some survived, Vose concluded, understanding now. They escaped the timeline collapse somehow. And now they want revenge. Not just revenge, Marlin corrected her. Justice. The right to exist. He turned to Creed. The Skarn aren't monsters, General. They're what remains of the Continuum, twisted and changed by centuries of existence in the void between timelines. Their bodies have adapted to survive temporal flux, the results of desperate biological manipulation during their escape. And you've been helping them, Creed realized. That's why your future self orchestrated his own assassination. Marlin didn't deny it. I discovered the truth 5 years from my present, your recent past. The evidence is all in Vault 7 Alpha, the original mission logs, the decision protocols, everything. When I confronted the Council, they gave me a choice, join them in maintaining the secret, or be erased from time. So you chose to help the enemy, Creed said, his voice neutral. Marlin laughed bitterly. Who is the enemy, General? The civilization we tried to erase from existence, or the leaders who ordered that erasure and then hid the truth for centuries? The temporal extractor beeped a warning. They had less than 10 minutes left before Marlin would be automatically returned to his timeline. Why are you telling us this? Vose asked. If you know you'll eventually choose to help the Skarn, why reveal their plans now? Because something went wrong, Marlin replied, his expression grim. The faction I worked with wanted peaceful resolution, acknowledgement of what was done to them, reparations, the chance to rebuild. But there are others, more radical, who want nothing less than our complete destruction. He grabbed Creed's arm. They're building something called the causal inverter. A weapon that could do to us what we did to them. How do we stop it? Creed demanded. Vault 7 Alpha contains the coordinates of their primary temporal nexus, the point where the survivors first stabilized their existence after escaping the collapse. It's their most vulnerable location. Marlin pressed a small data chip into Creed's hand. "My credentials. Use them to access the vault." The extractor's warning tone became more urgent. Marlin's form began to flicker as the temporal field destabilized. "One last thing," he said, his voice starting to echo as time pulled him back. "Not everyone on the council knows the truth. Vex does, she was there when it happened. She'll do anything to keep it hidden. Trust no one." With those words, Marlin vanished, the temporal vortex collapsing in on itself with a flash of blue-white energy. The extractor powered down, leaving Creed and Vose in stunned silence. "Could it be true?" Vose finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could we have been the aggressors all along?" Creed stared at the data chip in his palm. "There's only one way to find out." Infiltrating the restricted archives proved easier than they had anticipated. With Marlin's credentials and Vose's knowledge of security protocols, they accessed the central repository at a time when it was minimally staffed. They wore the uniforms of maintenance personnel, their faces obscured by the standard-issue breathing masks used by workers in the temporally sensitive areas. Vault 7 Alpha was located in the deepest level of the archives, protected by multiple security checkpoints. At each one, Marlin's credentials granted them access without question. Whatever his future self had done, his past identity remained trusted within the system. The vault itself was a small, sealed chamber containing a single temporal data core, a crystalline structure designed to store information immune to timeline alterations. As they entered, the lights activated automatically, illuminating the otherwise empty room. "This is it." Vose looked around, disappointed. "I expected something more substantial." Creed finished, approaching the data core. Sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the easiest to hide. He inserted Marlin's access chip into the reader beside the core. The crystal structure hummed to life, projecting a holographic interface into the air before them. Files and folders appeared, organized by date and security clearance. "Operation TIMEBURN," Creed read, selecting the oldest file. "Classification, Omega 9. Authorized by Echelon Council, year 2897. The file opened, revealing mission logs, strategic assessments, and video recordings. Creed and Vose watched in growing horror as the truth of what the Ascendancy had done was laid bare before them. The Divergence timeline, a parallel version of human history where genetic enhancement rather than temporal manipulation had become the cornerstone of civilization. The Continuum had never discovered time travel, focusing instead on biological adaptation and symbiotic technologies. They had been peaceful, prosperous, and completely unaware of the Ascendancy's existence until the Ascendancy discovered them. "Look at this," Vose said, pointing to a mission briefing stamped with the Council's seal. They called it Preventative Temporal Defense. They identified 17 critical nexus points in the Continuum's timeline and systematically collapsed them, erasing their entire civilization from history. Creed studied the faces of the Council members who had authorized the operation. To his shock, he recognized one of them immediately, a younger version of Councillor Vex. She had been there, just as Marlin said. Not a descendant of the original Council, but the same person, kept alive through temporal stasis technology reserved for the highest echelons of power. "They knew," he said, his voice tight with anger. "They've always known. And they've been lying to us, to everyone, for centuries." Vose had moved on to another file, this one containing surveillance footage from after the operation. "General, you need to see this." The recording showed a desolate landscape, the ruins of what had once been a thriving city. Chrono guards moved through the destruction, searching for survivors. Most found nothing but bodies, twisted and broken by the temporal collapse, but one team discovered something else, a sealed bunker, protected by unknown technology that had somehow resisted the chrono strike. Inside were survivors, hundreds of them, connected to strange machines that had shielded them from the timeline shift. They were warned, Vose realized. Someone from our side must have warned them. The recording continued, showing the chrono guards attempting to breach the bunker. The survivors fought back with desperate ferocity, using biological weapons unlike anything the Ascendancy had seen before. The battle was brutal, with heavy casualties on both sides. Then, just as the guards were about to break through the final defenses, something extraordinary happened. The entire bunker seemed to phase out of reality, disappearing into a rippling tear in space-time. They escaped, Creed breathed, into the void between timelines. And spent centuries there, Vose added grimly, evolving into what we now call the Skarn. Another file contained the coordinates Marlin had mentioned, the location of the temporal nexus where the survivors had first stabilized their existence after escaping. It was in the Antares system, at a precise point in both space and time. Antares Gate, Creed realized. That's why it's so important. It's not just a strategic location for us, it's where they've been rebuilding, where they're constructing the causal inverter. And where Counselor Vex is sending your fleet, Vose said, her face pale. Not to defend it, but to trigger an all-out war. To finish what they started centuries ago. Creed downloaded the crucial files to a secure data capsule. We need to get this information out, expose the truth before it's too late. How? Vose asked. The Council controls all communication channels. They'll simply declare it classified and have us arrested for treason the moment we try to share it. Creed considered their options. My ship, the Temporal Vanguard. The crew is loyal to me. If we can get back aboard, we might have a chance to broadcast the evidence before the Council can stop us. As they prepared to leave the vault, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the archives. Red lights flashed as security systems activated. They've discovered us, Vose said, checking the security feed on her handheld device. Chrono guards are sealing all exits. Creed drew his sidearm. How many? At least 20, moving in from all directions. Too many to fight. Creed looked around the vault, searching for an alternative escape route. There was none. We need a diversion. Vose hesitated, then made a decision. I'll create one. You take the evidence and get to your ship. Lieutenant, it's the only way, sir, she insisted. If we're both captured, the truth dies with us. One of us needs to make it out. Before he could argue further, Vose pressed something into his hand, her memory anchor. This will protect you from temporal manipulation. Now go. I'll draw them away. Creed wanted to protest, but he knew she was right. The evidence was too important. I'll come back for you, he promised. Vose smiled grimly. I know you will, sir. She checked her weapon, then moved toward the door. Give me 30 seconds, then head for the maintenance tunnels. They'll lead you to the lower docking bays. With that, she was gone, disappearing into the corridors of the archive. Moments later, Creed heard the sound of weapons fire and alarms from another section of the facility. Taking a deep breath, he slipped out of the vault and moved in the opposite direction, the weight of 3 centuries of lies heavy on his shoulders. The Temporal Vanguard broke free of Chronopolis Prime's gravity well, accelerating away from the heart of the Terran Ascendancy at maximum speed. In the command center, Creed stood surrounded by his senior officers, all of whom wore expressions of shock and disbelief. The evidence is conclusive, he told them, having just shown them the files recovered from Vault 7 Alpha. Everything we've been told about the Skarn is a lie. They're not invaders, they're survivors of a civilization that our leadership tried to erase from history. Commander Thorne, his executive officer, shook his head in disbelief. 3 centuries of deception, and now they're trying to finish the job. And using us to do it, added Captain Reza, tactical officer. The reinforcements for the 9th Fleet, they're meant to provoke an all-out war. Not if we can help it, Creed said firmly. Navigation, set course for Antares Gate. Maximum temporal velocity. Sir, Thorne said carefully, you realize this constitutes mutiny. The entire crew will be charged with treason if we fail. I'm aware, Creed replied. Which is why I'm not ordering anyone to follow me. This is a volunteer mission only. Any officer or crew member who wishes to return to Chronopolis will be provided with a shuttle and safe passage. He looked around at the faces of the men and women he had led for years. What I'm asking you to do goes against everything we've been taught to believe. but I cannot in good conscience lead this ship into a war based on centuries of lies. The command center was silent for a long moment. Then Thorn straightened, squaring his shoulders. I'm with you, General. Always have been. One by one, the other officers voiced their support. No one requested to leave, Creed nodded, touched by their loyalty but burdened by what it might cost them. Then let's make this count. Communications, prepare a fleet-wide broadcast. I want every ship in the 9th to receive the evidence from Vault 7 Alpha. What about Lieutenant Vose, sir? Thorn asked quietly. Creed's jaw tightened. She was captured, creating a diversion for my escape. Once we've secured Antares Gate, I intend to go back for her. If she was still alive. The thought remained unspoken but hung heavy in the air. Sir, the communications officer called out suddenly, we're receiving a priority transmission from Chronopolis Prime. It's Counselor Vex. Creed's eyes narrowed. On screen. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing Vex's face. She looked coldly furious, her normally composed features tight with anger. General Creed, she said without preamble, you are hereby ordered to return to Chronopolis Prime immediately. Your actions constitute high treason against the Ascendancy. I'm afraid I can't do that, Counselor, Creed replied calmly. Not now that I know the truth about Operation TIMEBURN. Vex's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flashed in her eyes. You've accessed classified information. Information you cannot possibly understand in its proper context. I understand enough, Creed countered. I understand that the Skarn were once human. I understand that the Ascendancy attempted to erase their entire civilization from history. And I understand that you were there when it happened. It was necessary, Vex hissed, dropping the pretense. The continuum represented an existential threat to our timeline. Their genetic modifications were creating beings that could naturally perceive and manipulate temporal energy, abilities that would have eventually surpassed our technological control. So you wiped them out, Creed said flatly. Billions of lives, an entire civilization, erased because you feared they might one day challenge your power. We preserved the only timeline that matters, ours, Vex insisted. And now the survivors threaten everything we've built. They're constructing a causal inverter at Antares Gate, a weapon that could do to us what we did to them. Then perhaps it's time we talk to them instead of trying to finish what you started. Vex laughed coldly. Talk? They're beyond reasoning with, Creed. Centuries in the void between timelines has twisted them beyond recognition. They want nothing less than our complete annihilation. Some of them, perhaps, Creed acknowledged. But Counselor Marlin was working with a faction seeking peaceful resolution. There's still a chance to end this without further bloodshed. Marlin was a traitor, Vex snapped. And now, so are you. Her voice hardened. This is your final warning, General. Return to Chronopolis immediately, or face the consequences. I think we both know that's not going to happen. Vex's face twisted with rage. Then you have sealed your fate. And the fate of everyone aboard your ship. She leaned forward. The 5th Battle Group has been dispatched to intercept you. They have orders to destroy the temporal vanguard on site. The transmission ended abruptly. Well, Thorn said into the silence that followed, I think that qualifies as burning our bridges. Sir, the tactical officer reported, long-range sensors are detecting multiple temporal signatures in pursuit. It's the 5th Battle Group, led by the dreadnought Kronos Hammer. Time to intercept. At current velocities, 3 hours, 17 minutes. Creed considered their options. The temporal vanguard was a powerful ship, but it couldn't hope to stand against an entire battle group. Their only chance was to reach Antares Gate before their pursuers caught up. Push the temporal drives to maximum, he ordered. We need to reach Antares Gate ahead of them. As the ship accelerated to speeds that strained the laws of physics, Creed couldn't help but wonder if he was making a terrible mistake. What if Vex was right? What if the Skarn truly were beyond reasoning with? But the evidence from Vault 7 Alpha haunted him, the deliberate erasure of an entire civilization, the centuries of lies that followed. No, he decided. The real mistake would be perpetuating those lies, participating in a genocide begun 3 centuries ago. Whatever awaited them at Antares Gate, it couldn't be worse than that. He was wrong. Antares Gate loomed before them, a massive temporal nexus point where multiple time streams converged. In normal space, it appeared as a binary star system with 7 planets, but viewed through temporal sensors, it was a kaleidoscope of intersecting realities, a perfect place to hide if you existed partially outside conventional time. No sign of Skarn activity, the sensor officer reported as they approached. In fact, no sign of any activity at all. Creed frowned. That can't be right. According to the files, this is where they've been rebuilding. Where they're constructing the causal inverter. Could the information be outdated? Thorne suggested. Before Creed could respond, a blinding flash of blue light erupted directly ahead of them. Space seemed to tear open, revealing a swirling vortex of temporal energy. Temporal rift, the tactical officer shouted. Massive energy signatures emerging. From the rift emerged the largest Skarn vessel they had ever encountered, a nightmarish structure of organic-looking metal and pulsing energy veins, easily 10 times the size of the temporal vanguard. Behind it came dozens of smaller craft, surrounding the massive flagship in a protective formation. Battle stations, Creed ordered automatically, even as he realized the futility of resistance. They were hopelessly outgunned. The expected attack never came. Instead, a communication request pinged on their systems. "They're hailing us, sir," the communications officer said, surprised. Creed hesitated only briefly. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that caused gasps throughout the command center. The being on the screen was humanoid, but only barely. Its skin was a translucent blue-white, revealing veins of temporal energy pulsing beneath the surface. Its eyes were entirely black, reflecting light like the void of space itself. Where a human would have hair, it had tendrils of energy that moved as if alive, but most shocking was its face, distorted and alien, yet undeniably based on human features. "General Varlan Creed," the being said, its voice resonating oddly, as if coming from multiple points in time simultaneously. "We have been waiting for you." Creed stepped forward. "You know who I am." "We know all who served the Ascendancy," the being replied. "I am Nexus Commander Varlan, last Admiral of the Continuum Fleet, now leader of those you call Skarn." "You were human once," Creed said, not as a question. "Once," Varlan agreed, the tendrils around his head rippling. "Before your people tried to erase us from existence. Before we were forced to evolve to survive in the void between timelines. I know what the Ascendancy did to your civilization," Creed told him. "I've seen the evidence from Vault 7 Alpha. That's why I'm here, to try to find a peaceful resolution before more blood is shed." Varlan studied him for a long moment, his alien features unreadable. "Counselor Marlin said you might come to understand. He tried to build a bridge between our peoples, to avoid the coming war." "Marlin is dead," Creed said. "Assassinated." "We know," Varlan replied. "By his own design. A necessary sacrifice to set these events in motion." Creed frowned. "I don't understand." "You will," Varlan assured him. "But not here. The Ascendancy forces are approaching. If you truly seek understanding, you must come aboard my vessel." "That's asking a lot of trust," Creed pointed out. "As is your presence here, General," Varlan countered. "If we wished to destroy you, we could have done so the moment you arrived." Creed considered his options. The 5th battle group would reach them within the hour. If they found him in communication with the Skarn, they would open fire without hesitation. "Very well," he decided. "I'll come aboard. But my ship remains here." Varlan inclined his head. "Agreed. A shuttle will guide you to our docking bay." As the communication ended, Thorne stepped close to Creed. "General, this is extremely risky. We have no way of knowing their true intentions." "I'm aware," Creed replied grimly. "But we're out of alternatives. If the battle group arrives while I'm over there, get the ship to safety." "That's an order." "And leave you behind?" "If necessary," Creed confirmed. The evidence from Vault 7 Alpha is what matters now. It needs to reach the people of the Ascendancy, no matter what happens to me. 30 minutes later, Creed's shuttle docked with the massive Skarn flagship. As he stepped through the airlock, he was struck by the alien nature of the vessel's interior. The walls seemed almost alive, pulsing with the same blue energy that flowed through the Skarn themselves. The air was breathable but strange, charged with a subtle energy that made his skin tingle. Varlan was waiting for him, flanked by two guards who appeared even more physically altered than their commander. Up close, the Skarn leader was even more imposing, standing nearly 7 feet tall, his presence radiating a power that transcended physical form. "Welcome to the Temporal Ascendant, General Creed," Varlan said. "The last remnant of continuum technology, and the vessel that carried our ancestors out of the collapsing timeline." "An impressive ship," Creed acknowledged, trying to hide his unease. "It is more than a ship," Varlan corrected him. "It is our home, our sanctuary, and now, the instrument of our survival, or our vengeance. Which it becomes depends on what happens here." He gestured for Creed to follow him deeper into the vessel. As they walked, Creed observed other Skarn going about their duties. Some appeared almost human, while others had evolved into forms barely recognizable as such. All carried the same blue energy within them, a direct result, he assumed, of their adaptation to life between timelines. "Your people have changed significantly," Creed observed. "Necessity," Varlan replied. "When we escaped the Chrono Strike, we found ourselves in a realm hostile to conventional life, the void between timelines, where reality itself is unstable. We adapted or died." Through genetic manipulation, Creed guessed, remembering what he had learned about the Continuum's technological focus. "Yes. The same technology your Ascendancy feared so much that they tried to erase us from history." There was bitterness in Varlan's voice, but also something else, a weary acceptance. "Here we are." They had arrived at a massive chamber at the heart of the ship. At its center was a swirling column of pure temporal energy, contained within a complex apparatus of metal and crystal. "The causal inverter," Varlan announced. "The weapon that could do to the Ascendancy what it did to us." Creed stared at the device, feeling a chill run down his spine. This could collapse the Ascendancy's timeline? Erase humanity as we know it? "Yes," Varlan said simply. "An eye for an eye. A timeline for a timeline." "You must know I can't allow that," Creed said, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. Varlan made a gesture, and Creed found himself frozen in place, unable to move. "If we wanted to activate it, General, we would have done so already." "No, this meeting has a different purpose." With another gesture, Varlan released him. Before Creed could react, the air beside them shimmered, and a familiar figure stepped through, Lieutenant Dana Vose. "Lieutenant?" Creed stared in shock. "How or hello, General," Vose said, her expression a mixture of apology and determination. "I'm afraid I haven't been entirely forthcoming with you." "She is one of us," Varlan explained. "A descendant of those few who remained behind in your timeline, hidden, preserving our legacy while we evolved in the void." A spy, Creed realized, feeling a sense of betrayal even as he acknowledged he should have suspected something. Her timely assignment to his command, her specialized knowledge of the Skarn, an ambassador, Vose corrected. "I was placed in your crew to evaluate you, to determine if you could be the bridge between our peoples that Counselor Marlin believed was possible." "You've been manipulating me from the start," Creed said bitterly. "The messages burned into time, the assassination, all of it designed to lead me here." "Yes," Varlan admitted without apology. "We needed to know if an Ascendancy commander, one of those who have hunted us for centuries, could recognize the truth when he saw it. Could acknowledge the crime committed against us. And now that I have? What happens now?" Varlan moved to the causal inverter, placing his hand on the control panel. "Now you make a choice, General Creed. The most important choice of your life, and perhaps of both our civilizations." He activated a display, showing a tactical map of the Antares system. Multiple signals were approaching, the 5th battle group, now less than 20 minutes away. The radical faction among us wants to activate the inverter the moment they arrive, Varlan explained. To erase the Ascendancy as it tried to erase us. I have barely managed to hold them back, to give diplomacy one last chance. What chance? Creed demanded. What choice? Vo stepped forward. The causal inverter can be reprogrammed. Instead of collapsing the Ascendancy's timeline, it could be used to reset the branching timelines to create a new, shared reality where both our civilizations exist. A second chance, Varlan added. Where the continuum and the Ascendancy evolve side by side, neither erasing the other. Is that even possible? Creed asked, hope and skepticism warring within him. Theoretically, Vo's confirmed. But it would require an immense sacrifice. Someone would need to pilot the inverter directly into the heart of the temporal rift it creates, a one-way journey. Understanding dawned on Creed. And you think that someone should be me? It has to be you, Varlan said firmly. The Skarn would never trust one of our own to do it, they would fear betrayal. And no one else from the Ascendancy has the authority or respect your name carries. Creed fell silent, weighing the choice before him. Death, or worse than death, erasure from time itself, against the possibility of peace between two civilizations locked in a cycle of vengeance. What about my ship? My crew? They will be allowed to leave, Varlan promised. With the evidence from Vault 7 Alpha. Whether you succeed or fail, the truth will be known. And if I refuse? Varlan's expression hardened. Then the radical faction prevails. The inverter activates as originally designed, and the Ascendancy ceases to exist. Before Creed could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The battle group has arrived early, Varlan announced, checking a display. They're engaging your vessel. Creed watched in horror as the tactical display showed the temporal vanguard surrounded by Ascendancy warships, taking heavy fire. They're going to destroy them, he realized. Unless you make your choice now, Varlan insisted. The moment the inverter activates, all temporal weapons in the system will be neutralized. Creed looked from Varlan to Vos, searching their alien and familiar faces for any sign of deception. He found none, only the desperate hope of those who had suffered beyond imagination and still dared to dream of peace. Very well, he said finally. I'll do it. For both our peoples. The shuttle was small and simple, designed for a single pilot. At its heart was a modified version of the causal inverter, reconfigured to generate a temporal reset rather than a collapse. Creed sat in the pilot's seat, reviewing the activation sequence one last time. Outside, the battle raged. The temporal vanguard was badly damaged but still fighting, while the Skarn fleet had engaged the Ascendancy battle group in a desperate holding action. Both sides were taking heavy losses. Vos stood beside him, her expression solemn. Once you enter the rift, you'll need to navigate to its exact center and detonate the inverter. If you succeed, both timelines will reset to the divergence point, creating a shared reality. And if I fail? Then nothing changes, she said softly. The war continues until one side or both are destroyed. Creed nodded, accepting the weight of what he was about to do. Tell Thorn, tell my crew that I'm sorry I couldn't find another way. They know, Vos assured him. They've already received the transmissions explaining everything. She hesitated, then placed her hand on his. It's been an honor serving with you, General. Even under false pretenses. The honor was mine, Lieutenant, Creed replied. Nexus Commander Varlan chose his ambassador well. Vos stepped back as the shuttle's airlock began to close. The last thing Creed saw was her salute, not the formal Ascendancy gesture, but something older, from a civilization he had never known but was about to give his life to restore. The shuttle broke away from the Skarn flagship, accelerating toward the temporal rift that had begun to form at the center of the battlefield. Enemy and ally alike seemed to pause as they realized what was happening. Creed opened a general communication channel. This is General Varlan Creed to all vessels. Stand down. I repeat, stand down. What you are witnessing is not an attack, but an attempt to end this conflict once and for all. The Kronos Hammer, flagship of the 5th Battle Group, moved to intercept him. Its commander's voice came over the comms, incredulous and angry. "General Creed, you are ordered to abort this mission immediately. You have been compromised by enemy influence." "No, Commander," Creed replied calmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm seeing clearly. The Skarn aren't our enemy, they are what remains of a human civilization that the Ascendancy tried to erase from history 3 centuries ago. The evidence is being transmitted to your vessels now." He accelerated, pushing the shuttle beyond its safety limits as he raced toward the growing rift. The Kronos hammer fired a warning shot across his bow. "This is your final warning, General," the commander barked. "Deviate from your course or we will fire." Creed ignored him, focusing on the swirling vortex ahead. The inverter was humming behind him, building power as it prepared for activation. The temporal vanguard, despite its heavy damage, moved to place itself between the shuttle and the battle group. Creed smiled grimly at Thorne's loyalty, even as he hoped his old friend wouldn't pay for it with his life. "All vessels, clear the area," he broadcast. "The temporal reset will disrupt all systems within 50,000 kilometers." Whether anyone heeded his warning, he couldn't tell. The shuttle had reached the edge of the rift, and reality began to blur around him. Time itself seemed to fragment, showing him glimpses of other possibilities, other paths his life might have taken. In one, he saw himself as a young cadet, full of pride and ambition. In another, he was an old man, dying peacefully surrounded by family he had never had the chance to build. In yet another, he was standing before the Echelon Council, being awarded the highest honors of the Ascendancy. Possibilities, all of them. Roads not taken. The center of the rift loomed before him, a perfect stillness amidst the chaos of fractured time. Creed input the final activation sequence for the inverter, his hand steady despite what was to come. "For both our futures," he whispered as he pressed the detonation command. The inverter pulsed once, twice, then unleashed its full power in a blinding flash that consumed the shuttle and its pilot. The energy wave expanded outward, engulfing the rift, rewriting the very fabric of reality. Time reset, history rewrote itself. 2 paths became one. And General Varlan Creed ceased to exist, erased from a timeline that would now never come to be. "First Officer Creed to the bridge." The voice over the intercom stirred Varlan Creed from his thoughts. He looked up from the viewport where he'd been watching the stars, straightened his uniform, and headed for the command deck of the Continuum Ascendant. At-45, Creed was younger than he sometimes felt. The last decade of joint exploration had been challenging but rewarding, pushing both Continuum and Ascendancy technologies to new limits as they ventured into the unknown regions of the galaxy. The bridge was a blend of both civilizations' design philosophies, the sleek, organic lines of Continuum biotechnology merged with the precise, metallic efficiency of Ascendancy temporal engineering. The commanding officer, Admiral Varlan, stood at the center, his gaze fixed on the main view screen. "You called for me, Admiral?" Creed asked as he took his position. Varlan turned, his features mostly human but with the subtle blue luminescence beneath the skin that marked all Continuum officers. "Yes, First Officer. We've received a priority communication from Federation headquarters. It seems they finally reached a decision about our proposal." The Federation, formerly known as the Human Continuum, was the unified government that had emerged when the two human civilizations had recognized their shared origins nearly a century ago. The history books recorded it as a natural convergence of two evolutionary paths, but occasionally, Creed had dreams that suggested otherwise. Dreams of conflict, of temporal warfare, of a sacrifice made in another life. "And?" Creed prompted, pushing away the strange sense of déjà vu that sometimes haunted him. "They've approved the Creed initiative," Varlan announced, a rare smile crossing his face. "The deep space exploration program will proceed, with the Continuum Ascendant as the flagship of the expedition." Creed felt a surge of pride. The initiative had been his brainchild, a proposal to venture beyond the boundaries of known space, seeking other civilizations and new frontiers. Many in the Federation had opposed it, arguing that humanity should focus on consolidating its existing territories rather than stretching further into the unknown. "Congratulations, First Officer," Varlan continued. "It seems your persistence has paid off." "Thank you, Admiral," Creed replied. "When do we depart?" "1 month. Just enough time to complete the final upgrades to the temporal shields and the bioadaptive navigation systems. As the bridge crew celebrated the news, Creed found himself drawn back to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Something about them called to him, a whispered memory just beyond his reach. For as long as he could remember, he had been driven by an inexplicable sense of purpose, a feeling that there was something vital he needed to discover out there in the void. Science Officer Dana Vose joined him at the viewport, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "You should be pleased," she observed. "The initiative wouldn't have been approved without your advocacy." "I am pleased," Creed assured her. "But sometimes I wonder, what?" He hesitated, unsure how to articulate the strange dreams that sometimes haunted him, visions of a war across time, of civilizations erased and reborn, of a sacrifice made in another life. "Do you ever feel like you've lived another life?" he asked instead. "Like there are memories just beyond your reach that belong to a different version of yourself?" Vose studied him with an unreadable expression. The temporal physicists have theories about that. Echo memories, they call them, impressions from timelines that no longer exist but somehow resonate with our own. "And do you believe in these echo memories?" A subtle smile played at the corners of her mouth. "I believe that time is more complex than we understand, even with all our technology. Perhaps there are versions of ourselves that made different choices, walked different paths. And those versions sometimes reach across the divide to touch us," Creed mused. "Perhaps," Vose agreed. "Or perhaps they're just dreams." Before Creed could respond, the ship's communication system chimed, indicating an incoming message. "Priority transmission from Chronopolis Prime," the communications officer announced. "It's Counselor Marlin." The view screen shifted to show an elderly man with kind eyes and a dignified bearing. Counselor Urek Marlin, one of the most respected figures in the Federation's government. "Admiral Varlan, First Officer Creed," he greeted them with a warm smile. "I wanted to personally congratulate you on the approval of the Creed initiative. It represents the best of what our unified civilization can accomplish." "Thank you, Counselor," Varlan replied. "We're honored by your support." "I have always believed that our destiny lies among the stars," Marlin continued, his gaze settling on Creed. "And that the best leaders are those who bridge divides rather than create them." Something in the way he said it stirred that familiar sense of déjà vu in Creed. For just a moment, he thought he saw something in the old man's eyes, a knowledge, a remembrance of things that had never happened. "Before you depart," Marlin added, "I would like to present you with something. A gift, of sorts. It's an artifact recovered from the early days of our civilization, a memory crystal that some believe contains glimpses of other timelines, other possibilities." "That's very generous, Counselor," Creed said, intrigued despite himself. "I think you'll find it illuminating," Marlin replied with a meaningful look. "Safe travels, Continuum Ascendant. May you find what you're looking for out there among the stars." As the transmission ended, Creed couldn't shake the feeling that Marlin had been speaking directly to him, sharing a secret that only they understood. 2 weeks later, in his private quarters, Creed carefully unwrapped the package that had arrived from Chronopolis Prime. Inside was a small crystal, iridescent blue, that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. A note accompanied it, written in Marlin's elegant hand: "Some sacrifices transcend time itself. Some heroes are remembered even in timelines where they never existed. Activate this crystal alone when you are ready to remember." Creed held the crystal in his palm, feeling it warm to his touch. With a deep breath, he activated it, allowing the stored temporal energy to flow into his mind, and he remembered. He remembered a war across time, a civilization erased from history, a desperate fight to prevent it from happening again. He remembered standing on the bridge of a different ship, making the ultimate choice to sacrifice himself for a chance at peace. Most of all, he remembered piloting a small shuttle into the heart of a temporal rift, activating a device that would reset history itself, giving humanity a second chance to follow a better path. The memories faded, settling into his consciousness like old friends returning after a long absence. They didn't overwhelm his current identity but integrated with it, adding depth and perspective to who he was. When the process was complete, Creed sat in silence for a long while, tears streaming down his face. Not tears of sorrow, but of profound understanding. In this timeline, this better timeline he had helped create, he had been given a second chance. Not just to live, but to continue the work he had begun in another life. A soft chime announced a visitor at his door. Composing himself, Creed called for them to enter. It was Vose, her expression concerned. "Are you all right?" "The ship-wide sensors detected an unusual temporal fluctuation coming from your quarters." Creed smiled, seeing her clearly for the first time. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Tell me, Lieutenant Vose, how long have you known?" She hesitated only briefly before sitting down. "Known what, sir?" "That in another timeline, you were the bridge between two civilizations at war. That you helped guide me to the choice that reset history." Vose's calm facade cracked slightly, revealing surprise. "You remember?" Thanks to Counselor Marlin's gift, Creed confirmed, showing her the now dormant crystal. "Not everything, but enough." She was silent for a moment, then replied softly, "Some of us have always remembered. Marlin, myself, a few others with the genetic predisposition to retain temporal memories across timeline shifts." She studied his face. "How does it feel?" "Strange," Creed admitted. "But right, somehow. Like finding a missing piece of myself that I didn't know was gone." "And does it change anything?" she asked carefully. "Your commitment to the initiative, to exploration?" Creed thought about it, then shook his head. "No. If anything, it strengthens my resolve. In that other timeline, I fought to give humanity a second chance. Now I want to see what we do with it." He smiled. "Though I might be more vigilant about preventing temporal genocide this time around." Vose laughed, a sound of genuine relief. "I'm glad. The Federation needs leaders like you, Creed. Especially as we venture into the unknown." As she left, Creed returned to the viewport, gazing out at the stars with new eyes. In one timeline, he had died to save two civilizations. In this one, he lived to lead them forward, united at different paths, different choices, but the same core purpose, to protect humanity, in all its forms, and guide it toward a better future. And as the Continuum Ascendant prepared for its historic journey into deep space, Creed found peace in knowing that some sacrifices echoed across time itself, rippling through realities to shape a better tomorrow. Some heroes were remembered, even in timelines where they never existed, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got a second chance to be both the person who saved the world and the person who lived to see it thrive.